Welcome to Family Drama Stories from Reddit. Real family drama told from the heart. Let's begin. Hello, my name is Evelyn James. I thought the worst was behind me until I pulled into my driveway one quiet evening and saw my childhood home packed with boxes that weren't mine. My sister stood smiling on the porch, waving like I was a guest. But I wasn't a guest. It was my house. And what came next would unravel decades of betrayal I never wanted to believe was real. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the one who made straight A's, came home before curfew, and never asked for much. My parents always said I was so dependable. But it wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. They depended on me to be invisible when needed, useful when it suited them, and silent no matter what. My younger sister, Marissa, was the golden child. She always had excuses made for her, even when she wrecked Dad's car, maxed out Mum's credit card, or dropped out of college for the third time. She's just figuring herself out, they'd say. Be patient with her, Evelyn. You're the strong one. That phrase haunted me for years. The strong one. As if that meant I didn't get to break. As if I had to be okay, so they didn't have to care. I moved out right after turning 18 and never looked back. I paid my own way through nursing school, working double shifts at a diner, picking up odd cleaning jobs at night, anything to survive. When I was 36, I bought my own home. Nothing fancy. A 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of Knoxville with creaky floors and a porch swing that needed fixing. But it was mine. Every corner of it paid for with my own hard-earned dollars. I never told my parents how much that house meant to me. They'd have twisted it into something ugly anyway. I hadn't spoken to my family much over the years. A birthday call here and there, the occasional text around the holidays. But after Mum fell and fractured her hip last winter, I took some time off work and drove down to help. She acted surprised to see me. "I didn't expect you'd come," she said, eyes shifting to Marissa, who sat curled up on the couch like a cat with a cream bowl. "You've always been so busy." That was her way of saying I had no excuse not to give more now. For 3 weeks, I cooked, cleaned, paid the bills, even got the leaking pipes fixed. Marissa couldn't help because she was between jobs again, and Dad, who'd retired early, claimed everything gave him back pain. When I packed my bags to leave, my mother said, "You know, we were talking, maybe you could let Marissa stay with you a little while, just until she gets back on her feet." "No," I said without hesitation. "My house isn't a halfway house." Her face soured like spoiled milk. "You always were selfish, Evelyn." I didn't argue. I just smiled politely, kissed her forehead, and drove back home. That was 6 months ago. And now, as I sat in my car looking at Marissa waving from my own porch like she belonged there, all I could feel was the icy crawl of disbelief. There were toys in the yard, her kids' toys, boxes on the front lawn, a minivan parked in my driveway. I opened the door slowly, hands trembling. "What are you doing here?" Marissa stood up, arms spread like I was being dramatic. "Surprise! Mum said I could stay for a bit. You weren't answering your phone, so we just let ourselves in. Isn't the place still in your name?" Still in my name. I felt my jaw clench. "You broke in?" "No," she said, rolling her eyes. "The door was open. Well, Dad helped a little. The lock was sticky, so he changed it. You'll thank us. It was practically rusted shut." I stepped onto the porch and saw it. The lock had been drilled out, replaced. "You had no right," I whispered. Marissa shrugged. "It's not like you're here all the time, and you don't have a family to fill it up anyway. The kids love it here. It feels like home already." I felt something deep inside me unravel, like a frayed rope snapping one thread at a time. "You need to leave," I said, voice low and cold. She laughed. "You're overreacting, Evelyn. Mum already called the police, just in case. We have a rental agreement signed and everything. You can't just kick us out, we're tenants now." I blinked. "A rental agreement?" "Yep," she said smugly. "Dad drew it up. Says you agreed. You didn't read the email?" There was no email. There was no agreement. There was only a sick, twisted lie wrapped in fake signatures and family entitlement. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and called 911. And as I turned toward the street, I saw my parents pulling up in their sedan. Dad got out slowly, folding his arms like he was preparing for battle. Mum didn't even bother to look ashamed. They were here to fight me for my house, and I was done playing the strong one. My fingers shook as I ended the 911 call. The dispatcher had stayed calm, asked all the right questions, and said an officer would be on their way shortly. Meanwhile, Marissa stood at the top of my porch like she was the one calling the shots, arms crossed, smirking like this was some sort of game she was winning. Dad walked toward me with the gait of a man who thought respect was owed, not earned. "We didn't want it to come to this, Evelyn," he said, his voice already carrying the tone of someone who blamed me for everything. "But you forced our hand." "I forced your hand?" I laughed, bitter and disbelieving. "You drilled out my front door lock. You forged documents. You broke into my house. And now you're telling me I left you no choice?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with those cold, disappointed eyes he always reserved for when I dared to stand up for myself. Mum stepped out of the car and made a beeline for me. "Honey, don't be dramatic. We're just trying to help your sister get back on her feet. You don't even have a husband, no kids. Why do you need a whole house to yourself?" That sentence hit harder than I expected. They weren't just stealing my home, they were invalidating my entire life. "Because it's mine," I snapped. "Because I worked for every inch of it. Because I built this alone while you were too busy treating Marissa like a porcelain doll and me like a backup generator." Marissa leaned against the doorframe and called out, "You're being selfish, Evie. You always have been. Mum and Dad just want what's best for everyone." I stared at her, trying to comprehend how someone could lie so casually and believe it. "You made copies of fake rental documents," I said, stepping closer. "That's fraud. That's a felony." "Oh, come on," she scoffed. "We needed something official to show the cops. You weren't responding to texts." "Because I blocked you," I barked. "After you sent me that message saying, 'Hope you enjoy your lonely little life.'" Marissa blinked. For a second, her face dropped, just enough for me to see that she remembered it. Then she plastered the smug expression back on. "You're just angry," Dad said. "You'll calm down." The sound of a police cruiser rolling up made them all glance toward the street. For a moment, there was quiet. Even Marissa's kids, who had been shrieking in the yard, went silent as the officer stepped out of the car. "Everything all right here, Mum?" the officer asked me. "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is my house, and they broke in while I was gone. They've drilled out the lock and replaced it. They're claiming I rented it to them, but that's false. I never signed anything." The officer nodded and asked to see my ID. I handed over my driver's license with the address clearly printed. "I also have the deed inside if you need more proof." "Let me talk to them," he said, and walked up the porch. Marissa tried to charm him, of course. Days. I watched her flip her hair, tilt her head, even force a nervous little laugh as she handed over the rental papers. I could tell the officer wasn't buying it. He studied the document, then looked at her. "There's no signature from Evelyn here." "She signed it digitally," Dad chimed in, clearly proud of the lie. The officer frowned. "Where's the proof of that?" Marissa opened her phone and began scrolling, pretending to look for something she clearly didn't have. That's when I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. This house has a Ring camera installed, doorbell and inside. I have footage of them entering with a drill. I have footage of them changing the lock. The officer looked at me, then back at Marissa. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I'm going to ask you and your family to gather your things and leave the property immediately. If you refuse, we will treat this as an unlawful entry, and you may be detained." "You're kidding," she gasped. "I'm not," he replied, already reaching for his radio. Marissa burst into tears, loud, dramatic sobs, and turned to our parents. "You said this would work. You said she wouldn't fight back." I watched my mother's face crumple in slow motion, like a mask slipping. My father clenched his fists, but said nothing. And in that moment, standing on my lawn in front of my stolen house, I realized something that changed everything. They had never thought I was strong. They had just counted on me being too tired to fight back. But they were wrong. And this time, they were going to regret it. The officer gave them 10 minutes to collect their things and vacate the premises. Marissa wailed like a siren, collapsing onto my porch with her hands covering her face, while her kids stood around confused, one of them tugging on her sleeve, asking if they were still going to get their own rooms. Dad muttered something under his breath and trudged to the house. Mum followed, red-eyed but still trying to play peacemaker. "You're breaking this family apart, Evelyn," she whispered as she passed me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was tight with the weight of years I had swallowed down. Every guilt trip, every moment they made me feel like I owed them for simply existing. It all sat there right behind my silence. But I wasn't silent because I agreed. I was silent because I'd finally had enough. The officer stood beside me while they gathered their things, mostly just plastic bins hastily packed, some toys and a few boxes. I didn't care what they took, as long as it wasn't mine. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. Not yet. Not if they leave peacefully. But I want it on record. "Understood," he nodded. "We'll file the report and document the forced entry. I'd recommend changing your locks immediately." I nodded. "I already have a locksmith on speed dial." It took less than 15 minutes for them to clear out. But before they drove away, Marissa made one last desperate attempt. She approached me, her eyes rimmed red, mascara streaking down her cheeks, belly cradled in both hands, like it was a shield. "I'm pregnant, Evelyn," she said softly. "Do you really want your niece or nephew to grow up homeless because of you?" I stared at her, heart pounding. It would have worked on me once, but not today. "You broke into my home. You lied to the police. You forged a lease with my name. I'm not the one putting your baby at risk. You were, and you're not welcome here. Not anymore." Her mouth twitched like she wanted to scream. Instead, she turned and stormed off to the minivan where her husband and kids were already waiting. The moment their car rolled away, I slumped onto my front steps, the adrenaline finally giving out. The officer offered a polite nod before heading back to his cruiser. The house was quiet again, too quiet, but at least it was mine. I called the locksmith before even going inside. An hour later, I had a brand new deadbolt and instructions to change the passcode on my security system. I did it immediately, and then I double-checked every window, every entry point, just to be sure. When I finally sat down on my couch, surrounded by the familiar hum of silence, it hit me. How close I'd come to losing everything I had built. I looked around the house, my house, and it felt different now. Less like a dream I'd barely earned, more like a fortress I had defended with blood and breath. Later that evening, I logged onto social media. My inbox was a minefield. Messages from cousins, family friends, even a few people I barely remembered. Some were supportive, saying they were proud of me for standing my ground. Others, not so much. There was one message from Aunt Denise, Dad's older sister. She'd always been kind to me, though distant. Her message was short but powerful. "I saw what they tried to do. You don't owe anyone your home, sweetheart. Proud of you. If you ever need a place for holidays, our doors open." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until I read it 3 more times. The next morning, Mum called. I let it ring. She tried again, then again. On the 4th call, I picked up more out of curiosity than anything else. Her voice was tired. "We didn't raise you to be cruel, Evelyn." I stayed quiet. "You could have just shared," she continued. "You know Marissa's going through a lot. You're alone. What difference would it make? And just like that, the mask slipped again. The years of favoritism, gaslighting, the way they had always made me the responsible one, the one expected to give and give without ever being given back. "I'm not alone," I finally said. "I'm free." Then I hung up. That day, I blocked her number. I blocked Dad. I blocked Marissa. And then, for the first time in my life, I sat down at the kitchen table and ate dinner in peace, not looking over my shoulder, not waiting for the next emotional ambush. For once, I wasn't the one who bent. They were, and I was just getting started. The days that followed were quiet, but not in a peaceful way, more like the quiet after a storm, where everything feels still but not yet settled. I checked my security system each night before bed, the new locks shining like armour. Still, I slept with one eye open, half expecting someone to bang on the door or toss another guilt-ridden message into my inbox. Instead, the silence stretched. A week passed, then another. Not a word from my parents, not from Marissa. The only sign that they were still paying attention came in the form of a vague Facebook post from my sister-in-law. Some people would rather watch a family fall apart than offer a hand. God sees. There were no names, no details, just enough to send a passive-aggressive dagger in my direction. I didn't comment. I didn't respond. I didn't even like it. I simply scrolled past it and then muted her profile. It was freeing, almost exhilarating. Still, not everyone stayed quiet. My cousin Stephanie reached out one morning. She was the only person from the family who'd stood up for me publicly, called out the forged documents, the break-in, even reminded others that I was the one who had lived out of my car for 6 months while Mum and Dad let Dan and Marissa move into their house rent-free. "Want to grab coffee?" she wrote. "Just us. No drama." We met at a local diner. She looked older than I remembered, but then again, so did I. "Is it really over?" she asked as we sipped. "I think so," I said. "They haven't come back." Good. I was afraid they'd try something else. I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She hesitated. "Dan's been talking to a lawyer, not a real one, his buddy from high school who works at some shady claims firm. They're trying to find a way to legally contest their house ownership. I don't think it'll go anywhere, but just be careful." I didn't flinch. Let them try. By now, I had copies of everything. My mortgage, my deed, the police reports, even a notarized statement from the locksmith confirming the lock had been drilled out. And if Dan's friend wanted to challenge any of that, I'd be ready. I had truth on my side. What I didn't expect, though, was the voicemail from Dad a few nights later. His voice was lower than I remembered, slower. "Evelyn, your mum's not doing great. Stress. Maybe guilt. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not calling to guilt you. I'm just..." He paused. "I just thought you should, no." Then he hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time. My first instinct was to delete the message, toss the memory into the trash with the rest of their manipulation. But something held me back. Not because I believed he cared or that Mum had suddenly changed, but because I needed to hear it. Even the strongest walls shake sometimes, and mine had taken a beating. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sat on my porch the next morning and watched the sun rise over the old maple tree in my front yard. The air was cool, the wind soft, and for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not because I regretted anything, but because for the first time in my life, I was living on my terms. Later that week, I had new curtains delivered. Bright ones, soft yellows and whites, full of light. I painted the guest room too, not for guests, for me. I turned it into a small reading nook with a lounge chair and a record player I'd found at a thrift store. It was my space now. Mine. When Christmas rolled around, I received an invitation from Aunt Denise again. Same warm message, same open door. "You're welcome anytime. And don't worry, I didn't invite your folks." I brought pumpkin pie and homemade rolls. It was the first holiday in years I didn't spend choking back tears or pretending to laugh at jokes that left bruises. As we finished dessert, Stephanie raised a glass and said, "To Evelyn, for finally taking what's hers." Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, genuinely, because for once I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the sister they could guilt into giving up her life. I was Evelyn, and I was done being anyone's stepping stone. The new year came with quiet mornings and the kind of peace I hadn't known I'd been craving. I spent January clearing out old boxes, decades of clutter that smelled like guilt and dust, birthday cards from my mother that never said "I love you," just do better. Notes scribbled in the margins of hand-me-down cookbooks. Remember, Dan doesn't like onions. I donated most of it, burned some too. Not out of anger, but ritual. By February, the silence from my parents had grown into something permanent. No more passive-aggressive voicemails, no surprise visits, not even a birthday text from Mum, which used to come every year without fail, usually alongside some subtle dig about how I was spending it alone. This time, there was nothing, and oddly, that felt like a gift. But just as I settled into the rhythm of peace, life reminded me it never really lets go that easily. It started with a knock. Not a pounding, not a storm at the gates, just a polite, hesitant knock on a Sunday afternoon. I looked through the peephole and saw Marissa. She stood there with a baby in a car seat and a toddler clinging to her coat. Her makeup was smeared, her hair thrown up in a messy bun, and her eyes, they were tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not manipulative, not smug, just empty. I didn't open the door, just cracked the window a couple inches. "What do you want?" She glanced down, then up at me. "We moved out of your parents' house. It's not good there anymore." I said nothing. "I know you probably think I don't deserve your help," she continued, her voice cracking. "And maybe I don't. But Dan's gone. Left 2 weeks ago. Took the car, the savings, everything." I blinked. That was a twist I hadn't seen coming. "I'm not here to ask for a handout," she added quickly. I need a safe place for the kids tonight. Just tonight. There's a shelter on the east side I'm trying to get into tomorrow morning." A part of me wanted to say no. Slam the window, remind her of everything she did, of the smug grin, the fake lease, the threats. But I looked down at the kids, and I saw me, decades ago, standing beside my mum while she sobbed to some relative, trying to manipulate them into letting us stay just one night. I remembered the shame, the confusion, the cold. I opened the door. "You can stay in the guest room, just one night. That's it." She nodded, eyes wide with disbelief. "Thank you." I didn't offer her tea or conversation. I showed her where the towels were and left clean sheets on the bed. I didn't ask for her story, and she didn't offer one. In the morning, she was gone before I woke up. Left a note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you. I won't forget it. I'm sorry. For everything." That was it. I never heard from her again. Months passed, spring melted into summer. I planted flowers along the front walkway and learned how to make bread that didn't taste like cardboard. I even started teaching part-time at the local library. Storytime for kids, book groups for seniors. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. And one evening, sitting on the porch with a cup of iced tea and a good book, I realised something. I hadn't just reclaimed a house. I had reclaimed myself. No more bending to keep the peace. No more sacrificing my joy so someone else could have a little more. No more being told that real family helps out, when really they meant real family rolls over and plays dead. I wasn't dead. I was blooming. Later that year, Stephanie and I hosted Thanksgiving together. My table was full of cousins, neighbours, friends who felt more like family than blood ever had. When someone asked if I missed my parents, I smiled and said, "I hope they're doing well, but I don't miss being small." And that was the truth. Because the moment I chose myself over their expectations, I stopped shrinking. I stopped apologising. And I started living. Sometimes family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, boundaries, and how people show up when it matters. In this story, our main character made the difficult decision to stand up against a lifetime of emotional manipulation, guilt, and entitlement. And though it came at a cost of being disowned, of losing ties that never felt like love, it also brought something far more valuable: peace, self-worth, and freedom. Too often, we're told to keep the peace at the expense of our own well-being. But protecting your space, your voice, and your future isn't selfish. It's survival. It's healing. And in many cases, it's the first step toward building the kind of life you deserve. So, if you've ever been made to feel small or selfish for simply saying no to unfair treatment, this story is for you. What would you have done in her shoes? Have you ever had to choose yourself over family? Share your story in the comments. We read everyone. If this story moved you, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about resilience, justice, and finding your voice. You are not alone, and your story matters.